Can you guys put the sound on?
We can't hear you.
That's better. Thank you.
All right, there you go.
Everybody here? All right, well, I'll just begin.
That was a great presentation.
For those of you who are here online, my name is Stephanie Kellerman. I'm here presenting with my co-board members, Meredith James and Eric Anderson. We're from the Community First Development Coalition, which is a new organization here in Tribeca that formed following the announcement that there would be, that a developer was planning a 900-foot tower in Tribeca in the Independence Plaza area. And I was just getting into reading our mission statement, which I'll start over for everyone online, which is that the coalition provides information and resources to preserve and enhance Tribeca's character. We advocate for thoughtful development that respects the neighborhood scale, historical integrity, and environment, while fostering community well-being, quality of life, and an increase in the amount of permanently affordable housing available. So, if you could, what's the next slide?
Next slide, right?
Next slide.
Yeah, she said.
There we go. So we brought together a really wonderful board. All of us are Tribeca residents and we come from different area occupations and areas of expertise. Some of us have a track record of longtime advocacy in Tribeca. And so we're kind of putting our heads together and bringing different perspectives to try to solve what we think is a problem that nobody's really come up with a great lasting solution to. So if you could flip to the next slide. So to get into the problem a little bit more, when the tower was announced, we sort of had this initial reaction that one of the main problems of this particular project is an as of right development, which means that it could go forward without meaningful input from the community and without a say from our policymakers and elected officials. So that was sort of an underpinning concern, but you know, some of the things that we would have liked to see considered in a project like this is the fact that there are neighboring homes that are really in close proximity to this particular site, which I'll let Meredith get into more detail here, that could cause a lot of damage and disruption to the people who are living there. There's a senior center located right next door, which could be disrupted in its operations. There's also the IPN towers are sort of surrounding where this new tower would be built, which could cause a lot of disruption to a lot of people who live there, which includes a lot of current affordable housing and a lot of Tribeca's longtime senior residents. They're also said that they'll be closing a parking garage for the duration of construction. There will be other sort of disruptions to the street and traffic during that time. And there's a school sort of I think one or two blocks away. You know, after it's built, this is just another thing that adds to Tribeca's density, which is a historic neighborhood and is more of a lower profile, especially in this area. And we also see this as sort of like a missed opportunity for a meaningful addition of affordable housing with any new building that goes up. This is planned to be a luxury tower, and probably believe it will most likely be condos. There won't be any meaningful new or affordable housing added. And the developers sort of made some statements about how there would be affordable housing, but that is sort of preserving some limited existing affordable housing in the neighboring towers, not in this new building. So for us, this is, you know, a fight against that tower, but it's a lot more. I think we see this as that is our short-term problem, our impetus for coming together. But as we started looking into that problem and other efforts to solve similar or to fight against similar projects, we found that there's this sort of whack-a-mole situation where there's a lot of ability for these types of projects to come up that Eric will speak to much more. And we wanted to find a longer-term solution to achieve our aims. And so this is sort of the start of what we hope would be a longer-term fight. You could flip to the next one. So as we began looking into ways to address this problem and future problems like this, we sort of saw three general paths that we could take. And, you know, likely there's some combination of these paths that we think are appropriate. The first is litigation, which has been tried a number of times with similar projects with varying levels of efficacy. The second is for us to look at innovative policy solutions here and really curate things that make sense for this community that haven't necessarily been tried before. And the third is expansion of existing protections in Tribeca. That means primarily historic protections because this is mostly a historic neighborhood, but it's much more patchwork than you would see in other cities with historic districts. So if you could go to the next one. So our starting place here was in looking at past efforts and what has worked. We looked to our neighbors at Two Bridges who recently had a fight over a large development that was planned there. And in that case, they went the path of litigation. And we looked at what happened in that litigation. What happened was they had success at the lower court level, and that success was overturned on appeal. And up here on the slide, I pasted an excerpt from the appellate court's opinion. And this is, of course, dicta, you know, just a court sort of saying what it thinks they should have done. But we sort of are using this as a starting point for inspiration to look at potential ideas here. And the court said, you know, you can't challenge, this is not appropriate for litigation. You know, we're going to uphold the city's designation that this could go forward without a ULURP review. But, you know, they could have and they didn't look at rezoning, look at changing the laws to prohibit buildings of this scale. And so that's sort of our starting point. And again, I'll let Eric get more into the nitty gritties of what we found looking into that, but that's where we're beginning. And with that, I'll hand it off to Meredith to talk a little bit more about the specific project.
So my name is Meredith James, and I live in one of the federal townhouses on Harrison Street, west of Greenwich Street. If you've seen them, they're 9 townhouses. They're all individual landmarks, and it was the first landmarks project the city ever did before there was a landmarks commission. It's the first one. So it's they're important houses to the city in one way, but we don't actually sit on a historic district. I'm just giving some background of where I stand. So our group has been working with the residents of the historic townhouses, and we hired as a group, us and the residents, George Janes, who's a zoning expert, to look into exactly what the tower that Bernina was proposing, where it would go and how big it would be, according to what they've presented so far. And also to dig into the documents related to the large-scale plan of the IPN site. He's looking to see if there's a way to challenge the as of right, or if they really truly do have as of right. A lot of those documents are historic and have been very hard to access. We have a lot of FOIL requests out, and it's been like 9 months on our first one, and it has not been filled yet, but we're working on it. We're talking to a lot of other experts like structural engineer, environmental engineer, and historic preservationist, but that's where we're starting. So if you go to the next slide. So this is the site as it exists, the IPN site, and you can see the yellow buildings are the IPN buildings, and then the little gray buildings tucked in are the historic townhouses, and the red areas are all the areas that will be demolished to make way for the new tower and then it's a tower, and then there are 2 wings that are going to be the new development that Bernina wants to do. So if you go to the next slide. So this is the tower. As you can see, it's actually almost 3 times the size of the existing IPN building, and it's very, very close to both the townhouses and the existing 310 Greenwich Street, which is the building on the left of the tower. If you go to the next slide. So this is actually showing the distances to the townhouses and IPN building. So it's 48 feet from the existing tower at 310 Greenwich Street, and it's 50 feet from 41 Harrison Street. Now, 41 Harrison Street was built in 1828 and has had no structural work at all. My house actually has, but that house has had nothing. And I mean, if you go look at the wall, it's like bowing out right now. It's not in the best shape. And then the building below, it says like loft building B is 22 feet from 25 Harrison Street, and 25 Harrison Street was built in 1798. So it's very, very close to these old buildings, and the site, from what we think it might require dewatering, possibly pilings or cesslins to support that very high structure. And that would be a lot of just destabilization and vibration in the ground right next to these very old houses. So if you go to the next slide. So a really bad scenario would be if they did start work on this site and tore down a part of IPN, and then the work was stopped. But that's a realistic scenario, given like these are some other construction halts in the area, and there are others. There are a lot of construction halts in downtown Manhattan, and part of the reason they're different reasons, but at 65 West Broadway, the work stopped because it was the structural integrity of that building that's being supported by the I-beams. It started to crack, so they had to stop work, and that lot's for sale. And 65 Franklin Street, 2 buildings started to crumble, and the landlord, the person who owned those buildings, actually wanted to tear them down, so they were torn down. But the people across the street from that construction site at 65 Franklin have said that their building is also cracking. I did actually photograph the building, but I don't know if that's why it's cracking or not. But so we are there. I think it's a realistic scenario that we would have a construction site that was just a pit, or for years. And obviously that's a really bad scenario for us and for the community. You can go to the next slide. I think I'm going to pass it on to Eric.
So we're looking at a lot of short-term solutions that are related to the Vornado Tower. But we think that there's a larger issue here that should be addressed now, even though it's a longer-term solution, a zoning change. Right now, our zoning in the areas in purple within the red trapezoid there, that's C64, which is roughly equivalent to along 57th Street in Midtown, where you have Billionaires Row. We think there's going to be a slow trickle, like there has been since 2006, where more and more of these sites get developed. We've identified 8 sites that could support super talls in Tribeca. We know that the timing on this, best case for a zoning change, 2 years to 5 years probably. Vornado will probably have proceeded within 5 years or 2 years. But we think if there's active zoning, practical, appropriate zoning for the neighborhood that the community is behind, that could become a part of the conversation between city planning and the developer. This isn't purely as of right, it's kind of an in-between stage. It's a large-scale residential development. So they will be doing a environmental review. They've said they'll do a full EIS. So there will be some chance for input. There will surely be a chance for negotiation with the developer. So we'd like to get the community behind a zoning alternative. We think right now there are many good alternatives. We think we have the absolute worst possible zoning because there's no height limit. This is not contextual zoning. The areas that's not in purple within the trapezoid is contextual from the Tribeca mixed use rezoning, but the purple areas were excluded for different reasons. The towers that went up on the right in 2006 56 Leonard, which is the green tower on the left, and the illustration on the right, and followed by 111 Murray, which is the green tower in the back on the right. I'm sorry, the other one's on the left. And then in orange, the proposed Vornado Tower. Looks a little different than the other one because we haven't got an exact footprint, but the height is correct at 940 feet. So we see the next slide, please. So this is what could be built. And I was on the community board in 2006. I raised this issue. The feeling then was, each site unlikely to happen. But since then, we've had 111 Murray, we've had the Vornado site, the other sites here from left to right. On the far left, the AT&T building. Behind 56 Leonard on the left is the New York State Insurance Fund. The other building behind 56 Leonard would be 40 Worth Street. PS 234, the first building on the grouping on the right. And then 3 towers where BMCC is. And I think it's realistic to say, oh, none of these are going to happen. But over the course of zoning, 20, 30, 40 years, I think they'll all happen. There's 5.7 million square feet that can be built as of right. At about $400 to $500 a square foot, that means the value's somewhere between 2.5 and 3 billion. Each site, roughly 300 to 350 million. That tends to get monetized over time. Whether, you think PS 234 won't get developed, but the School Construction Authority and the city partnered with a developer worldwide on 57th Street to put a school at the base of a residential tower. It could happen at PS 234. There are a lot of problems with PS 234 with the exterior, the brickwork. There's some fundamental flaws there. That building could be replaced with a high-rise. BMCC, Vornado and Related already made a run on that when they were doing the Penn Station project. They proposed that they put BMCC in what's now the Moynihan Building at Penn Station, and that they take over the BMCC site for a development. Related was most involved in that negotiation, but Vornado was their partner. You see the next slide, please. So options. We see 3 options. I mean, it's basically everything. You can downzone with height limits. You could do neutral density, meaning similar FAR or the same FAR with height limits. Or you could upzone. Typically, community groups don't want to upzone. The quirk here is that the city will only do, their policy has been to only do mandatory inclusionary housing, meaning mandatory affordable housing when there's an upzoning. So it's an option that should be addressed if the community is serious about mandatory affordable housing. And again, in areas where rental buildings are built, the tax combination of the 485 tax benefit and the potential for upzoning has made it where rentals may happen. They're realistic, but in Tribeca, where it's condominiums, the 485X doesn't work with that. So it's very unlikely that any rental buildings and any affordable housing, new permanent affordable housing will be built in Tribeca under City of Yes or the current zoning. So this option shows neutral density, where if you zero in, you have a pointer.
Yeah, actually, I do. So if you take a look, wait for her.
My pointer would normally have the battery out.
My eyeball doesn't have it.
But
Yes.
That's
great.
There we go. The question is, how did I get it pointing?
Turn in.
It's working on
Slide right.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Knock yourself out. It's
Okay, are you holding something down?
the power button on the other side.
Power button on the other side. Yes. Is that the on off or the power?
That's a great question. I think it's, I think it's the laser pointer one. Because that's the one I was pointing. And I was pointing at my,
There we go. Okay, so if I can get this zeroed in, it's a little jumpy. That is the 310 Greenwich site. Actually, next to, so these are the townhouses, the historic townhouses right there. And this would be two towers instead of a single tower. The wing buildings, we would think would be lower near the historic buildings. That could be done with zoning, and higher away from the historic buildings in that location. So two towers, this one and this one here.
no offense, I'd love you to get rid of the ideas for BMCC. We like BMCC. We're on record as keeping BMCC. We don't want them moving out of the neighborhood.
I think all of us would be, or many of us would be pretty happy if nothing was built. But under current zoning, the BMCC site is worth $1 billion. And over 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, will the state and the city try to monetize that site for $1 billion? Maybe. We think that we'd like to not see this get built. We'd like to see BMCC be there forever. But if we want BMCC to be there forever, having the current zoning is problematic. Right down the block, related to the building that sold for over 4,000 a square foot. That's really pushing up towards the numbers that are currently being achieved on 57th Street. It's probably the second highest sellout for a residential developer in the city for a condominium development. So we think these buildings will get built. And then you can see on the left, the AT&T building, Forty Worth, packed down low. These heights are roughly equivalent to the 310 Greenwich Street, which is about 467 feet to the top residential floor, about, 367 feet to the top residential floor, and about 390 feet to the bulkhead. If we see the next slide, please. This is neutral density. The point of these three slides is downzoning, upzoning, and neutral zoning are all very similar in the massing compared to the current zoning that allows super adults. So this is lower zoning. These are slightly lower. And that would be a downzoning to about an R9X with a 9 FAR instead of a 10 FAR. See the next slide, please.
Hey, Jason, can you open the door for?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Maybe just leave it open.
Okay, we're yapping, you know?
And please tell them to be quiet or move further north on the outside because
These guys are bad.
absolutely,
We give you this stuff.
for airflow, you're gonna want.
So this is the upzoning option. We think that upzoning would trigger mandatory affordable housing. We think that any upzoning, if the community were to consider that, should have height limits. These buildings are at about 435 feet. They're about 40 feet above the bulkheads of 310 Greenwich and the other Independence Plaza towers. But we think all three of these options are preferable to the current zone. See the next slide, please. Again, that's the current zoning.
I go back one just so people can see.
Yeah.
That's one.
And that's up, the upzoning, that shows a 13.5 FAR. That could be one of the new City of Yes zoning designations and our 11A equivalent. They're proposing that be at 15 FAR. This is showing 13.5 FAR. since that 15 FAR has not been established through ULURD yet. Okay, so 5.7 million square feet, roughly 5,700 units. It could go up or down, but that's roughly the number of units. No mandatory affordable housing with a decrease or a neutral FAR within a height limited rezoning. But if within an upzoning and mandatory inclusionary housing, 2,400 units of mandatory affordable new permanent housing. So we think these are all viable choices. When we spoke to Chris Marte said the upzoning would be a heavy lift. I think what's amazing here is that he's not playing his cards close to the vest. He's saying that he supports doing something about this building and about zoning in the city. He's the vote that counts with home rule. And the one thing he's really, I think, asking for is a unified community that has a proposal on the table that he can back. He did not have that at Two Bridges. Or it didn't occur at Two Bridges.
And then if you want to take us to the final slide, I'll sum us up. So just to reiterate, we're a nonprofit community organization, soon hopefully to be a 501c3. So our main role here is really information. You know, what we're doing is working with the community. We've had 2 sort of full community meetings to understand like what it is the community wants long-term. What is it that, you know, we've proposed some options. What is it that resonates with people? What can we get consensus behind? And then for us to investigate various options. And we've proposed some here. We see this as a start of idea generation. And to really pick at this problem that we've seen other organizations try to solve with sort of shorter term or more limited success. So we hope that this is the first of many meetings that we'll be at. We hope that this is the beginning of a discussion. And with that, you know, we're happy to answer any and all questions. I have behind me is the rest of our board and BJ over there. And then I believe Diane Lassen is on Zoom as well. And so, yeah, we're happy to hear what thoughts or questions everyone has.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go around and let board members ask questions both online and in the room. I guess I'll kick us off. So the first question I have is, and you may not have an answer, is what does your run with, like timing are you expecting to get to a place where you can have something that's actionable? And I say that because I think if this committee is inclined and the community board is inclined, as I expect it would be, to help back that and support it, what does it look like and when?
When are you ready to go?
Well, I mean, is there a baked plan?
That-
Is there a plan that's pretty baked? Or in other words, do you have something that you could put together in terms of a zoning application or?
Well,
Where do you stand on that?
anybody else can answer too, but there are a couple of ways to go. One would be a 197A backed by the community board. I think there have been 10 to 20 of those done since they've been on the books, since it's been part of the legislation. There hasn't been one done, I think, since 2008, so it's been a while. It's a heavy lift for a community board. The alternative would be getting the city to back it, either this administration or the next administration. Just trying to read political tea leaves, I don't think that's likely for a downzoning. Might be possible for a neutral zoning. Right now on the east side of Tribeca along Broadway, you have instead of a C64, you have a C64A. So it'd be reasonable to say there should be a C64A, just like along Broadway, to see if the city would back that. Probably, I'll leave the political tea leaves on that. The upzoning option, I think they could be very interested in. They have a new R11 and R11A and R12. They're proposing that for the garment center, but they don't have, it needs its own Euler. So to come in with that, I think this administration, I think, Dan Garodnick might think that that is something that they might make a priority. Or the next administration, it doesn't happen in this administration. I think if the city backs it, if this or the new administration backs it, then it's a much easier lift than being done by the community board. Although it could be started as a 197A by the community board.
I'll have other questions, but I want to give others opportunities. Sandy
So-
first.
I'm gonna,
Jason.
at the end of the meeting, everybody should stay tuned for a discussion on 100 goal. Your timing is super bright, and I say that because Community Board One has had lots of discussions in 2024 about zoning and what is happening in our neighborhood. And one of our goals for 2025, and yes, we recognize it's an election year, but one of the goals that we have, and I'll talk more about it at the end, is as a whole community board to take a look at our zoning, right? And to have these discussions with direct analysis for, here's what we are. You know, we have these fabulous manufacturing districts. What do we manufacture in Lower Manhattan anymore? We are not a manufacturing zone, right? But we are a zone that's grown with incredible residential growth. And we have not kept up our infrastructure with residential growth. Our hospital was built decades before the people got here, right? It barely can keep up with what it has. We've built the schools, which is amazing. That was something that the city totally supported us on for, after lots of pushing, kicking, screaming and everything else. We got great schools and we have infrastructure for schools. But the only thing that the city has built in Community Board One since 2020 is shelters. So we are a board that has been built on an 80-20 model, or a 90-10 model, depending on how you want to do it. We've had the current administration stand on Water Street and tout the conversion to residential, but it's all market. At the same time as our 421As have been expiring. We are the district, Senator Kavanaugh's district, that has lost more affordable housing than any other in the state. City of Yes, we voted against as a community board because it didn't have required affordability that would actually help our neighborhood. And it still allows people to offset. And what we've seen is pursuant to the city, what I testified in city council, post 9/11, they built affordable housing down here, a lot of it, and people flocked to the neighborhood, and we built new schools. As soon as all of it started converting to luxury and market, our schools also started draining, not helped by COVID-19, which we have not recouped from. And how do we know this? We had over 125 seats available for migrant family kids, which is good because we want to help kids, but it shows you the connection between the housing issues that we have. So Community Board One is going to do an unusual thing, but we should be a community that says, okay, we planned before, let's get back to that business. So instead of having City Hall tell us what we know we need, we should be looking at all of our zoning. And that is a goal for 25 and 26 for Community Board One. It doesn't only have to be 197.
Yeah.
We need to take a look. There are programs that are currently on the books that end at Chamber Street because they didn't think that there was a residential population downtown. Right. And they don't include it because, oh, well, you don't have a lot of people who are high need. No, because you keep squeezing them out. So if we really want a socioeconomically diverse neighborhood, which we do, because we saw how that supports street life, supports grocery stores and all kinds of uses, City of Yes could be utilized, could be if the will was there. And what we want to really take a look at, what are the barriers that are currently in place all throughout CB1 to getting what we want versus passing micro zoning, which is what we saw with the Water Street Tax Amendment, which was designed specifically to help the business corridor. On the business corridor, I have 7 brand new commercial to residential conversions. So a decade goes by, it's not the commercial corridor that they thought. So let's really take a look. What do we want for CB1? You're looking specifically in Tribeca. We want to have those discussions for the Seaport, for FIDI, for Civic Center, which is growing. Right, everywhere that the city controls zoning, which kind of includes Bedford Civic, but. So, there you go. Welcome to CB1. Great way to kick off the year.
Can I just respond a little bit to that?
Well, Jason had his hand up first.
Yeah, and just, Tommy, you are speaking so great tonight, and I don't want to take any time up, and I just echo everything that you said. You did the whole thing, you touched every single thing,
Yep.
so. My friend over there should go.
get that.
Oh. No. You could never do anything better than what Tammy said.
Okay, Rich, Michael, then Rosa.
So I'm abusing my position here a little bit because I'm speaking actually as part of the coalition, not as part of the community board. But I just, I'm thrilled to hear what you had to say, Tammy. That's really exactly why we're here, which is to develop this dialogue with the community board and develop a partnership with the community board so that we can, first of all, understand together what the community really wants and will support. And we will work in support of that. Whatever that looks like, we'll work out together, but we have, hopefully we'll have resources that the community board doesn't have, and the community board has, of course, resources in the larger community that we do not. So that kind of collaboration is exactly why we are here today, and it's just wonderful to hear you express it that way. What the solution is and the time frame, Patrick, we are, the tower was proposed a year ago, but it's taken us time to get ourselves organized and understand where we are. But we're getting a lot of traction, and this is a representation of that as well. And I think the pace will pick up very quickly.
And please understand, my question wasn't a criticism of you.
No, I didn't think of that.
I'm hopeful that this collaboration will start right away, but that I'm just curious as we plan our committee meetings and that sort of stuff, where we can help and just so that we have people in the room and we have our resolutions and all that kind of stuff together in the right order. Michael and then Rosa.
Right, starting with the long-term solution. The 197 days, the first one was done with Community Board 4. And that's back in the mid-90s. And it was in West Chelsea. And it took us about 3 years to put it together. And frankly, what did it achieve? You know, you look at the High Line and you look at all the luxury housing there, you didn't get any affordable housing out of it. You know, you have an immediate problem. You have a potential development. You know, we, in the community and the community board, you know, we dealt with 250 Water, which is what I was one of the leaders of 250 Water opposition to Seaport Coalition. So, you know, we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars with the lawyers. And the city still found a way to paper it over to make it happen. I would strongly suggest you look into what's going on with Merchant's House. And the Michael Hiller is leading that lawsuit. And the problem being that any development next door would disrupt the fragile interior of Merchant's House. So that's one to look at. You have to remember that Two Bridges was initiated by Gail Brewer. And so it was done by the city council, it wasn't done by the locals. And, you know, we also had the honor of winning in front of Judge Ngorian at New York State Supreme Court, and the honor of being denied unanimously by the appellate and not even having an opportunity to get to the Court of Appeals. It's really tough to litigate, and especially in this world of the city of yes. You should also know that there's going to be a challenge to the city of yes that may suggest that any community board that voted against it not be subject to it. Which is interesting.
That'd be nice.
Yeah. I was briefed on that the other day.
It's also
Yeah, yeah.
firehouse museum is also compromised.
I don't think so.
So if you're dealing with an EIS, which we had to deal with as well with 250 Water, I suggest you look into shading issues. That you have the historic buildings and the effect upon those historic buildings having shade on them. any public open space, the schools, any of that ilk. You'll find that they probably will be throwing a tremendous amount of shade in some direction at some time, and they'll obfuscate that. And it's not necessarily a winning argument, but it's certainly something that can slow them down and make them spend a lot of money to convince you. It's also something that can build a lot of public support if you show that your neighborhood is going to be forever in shade. And the same thing with the variety of towers coming up, super talls, the same thing with the shade that's going to come over the, suddenly clouds over the neighborhood. I didn't see anything here about 5 World Trade Center. You gonna add that to the mix? You certainly didn't see anything about all the office to residential conversions that are gonna go on downtown, which speaks to Tammy's point about just the rapid growth of the residential population and how the infrastructure is not keeping up with it. And the parks and whatever are not gonna be able to handle that. So just those couple of recommendations, and if you want to talk more about litigation, I don't really want to talk about it, but I could talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a litigator by day, and, I think any litigation here is going to need to be a little creative, and is one tool in the quiver of arrows that we have. So it's definitely helpful to.
Maybe find a sacred fish or something like that.
Yeah, that would be great.
Rose, I think you're next, and then
Um,
Laura online.
it's really interesting going to the whole shade issue. I think that when you're showing the 3 different options that you have, that sort of shorter, like squatter with the same amount of square footage really is going to be deeply impactful on longer periods of shade for the surrounding community than a super tall, that's essentially a sliver will be, right? Because that's.
There are more impacts nearby.
Yeah.
You are at a distance.
Right, so like for the residents of IPN, for instance,
Mhm.
if you have a short squat building, and I think based on the rendering that you had or the massing model, that it showed essentially the same footprint of development, but just denser, then that doesn't actually address the concerns that you had raised about the historic nature of the buildings that are right next door and whether or not they will be impacted structurally from the work that goes on.
Well, it does a little bit though, because without such a tall tower, it could be built a little bit differently, but also in the massing that Eric did, there was this kind of, he did actually build like a lower footprint. One of the issues for our townhouses is the 8-story like wing is we're gonna be like really, really in shadow all the time from that too. It's not
Yes.
just the tower, it's also that. So that was lowered down to where it is now, which is like 4 stories.
Yeah.
And so, but I think I do have to say, like, we would all love it if nothing ever got built, but I think the idea is like, there's a trade-off where if we are building something, the idea of it having, affordable housing or a more diverse population potentially than
Right.
just a luxury tower is a lot easier to stomach. Like even
Yeah.
the townhouses they're all expensive townhouses.
Yeah.
But all of my neighbors support the affordable housing idea and like that, even though it would still not be great for us, but like
Right.
it would be better because we were really sad to see the school go 150.
So we were actually a 150 family, and then we moved to Tribeca, to Phi. The difference in experience is enormous, but it did give the school an opportunity to grow in population, which is only a good thing because, they recently won the Blue Ribbon, and then Nika, the principal, got an award. And I think the more kids that are able to experience that kind of, excellent educational environment, better, even though there are trade-offs. We were very sad to leave, and a lot of the families are still sad that we had to leave. Having said all of that, I mean, I'm really happy to hear you say that about the affordable housing side, even recognizing that there is possibly going to be more shade and more densification to be able to integrate the affordable housing into there. I think honestly, that's probably, as you said in your presentation, the strongest chance of success. Is to fight for that affordable housing,
And
but
I want to
it's,
just add to what Rose is saying by understanding the argument that the city will tell you, because we will hear it on January 23rd, about 100 gold is, we hear you about affordable housing. 25%? No, we're actually looking for 100, thank you. But they will say, yes, we're giving you affordable housing, but it's creating this, it's further reducing the affordability, because 25 and 30%, we will lose more than that in any one building over the course of time. So it's not enough.
but we also can't be hypocritical and sort of say, well, you don't have, we haven't gotten any affordable housing here, but then object to every project that has the potential of delivering us affordable housing, right? So I think that if we really truly want to integrate affordable housing into our community, then we have to support it. And it's not necessarily going to be in one project. It's going to be in and it should frankly be in multiple projects throughout the entire community board and not focus on delivering it in one. That's just my take on it. I went to a lot of City of Yes testimonials, and time and again it came up, well, see, like our district doesn't have any new affordable housing and hasn't had any new affordable housing in a really, really long time. And what has happened with the projects that could have offered that, right? So you guys are closest to it. But yeah, like it has a lot of trade-offs. And I guess, and I really actually love that you were willing to look at, even if timing wise, a battle on, Independence Plaza isn't, likely to be winnable, then let's look at the zoning for the entire neighborhood. I was wondering if maybe the reason why Five World Trade wasn't in there, is because if you were to look at that massing model again, anything that goes further south actually does get significantly taller and denser and yes.
Our mission was very
Yeah.
Tribeca based. It could expand, but right now it's Tribeca based.
Yeah.
And what you were saying about affordable housing, that's gonna work in some neighborhoods where a lot of rental projects go up, like Long Island City and the South
Right.
Bronx. I work in development. It's not gonna work here. It's
Really
not
not.
mandatory. It will not be built in condo buildings.
Can I jump in one more thought that I missed? You might want to look into the history of Washington Market and when it was condemned and all of the conditions around the condemnation that created IPN. And I would refer you to Catherine Freed, who was the former council member. And she may have documents and recollections from that period of time that could be helpful to your litigation team.
Laura?
Thanks, Patrick. Rosa, I wanted to just second everything you said and build on that. And I have a question listening to this. Like, is the concern more about the height or the affordability? Just so I understand. In other words, if all of those super talls were affordable housing, would that be okay to your group? Or is it?
I think we've had this sort of world debate. I've been asked this multiple times since I started this, and I think that everyone in this group feels very passionately about affordable housing. And I think that if, there was a full tower being built of purely affordable housing and it was bringing hundreds or thousands of units of affordable housing to Tribeca, would we want to spend our blood, sweat, and tears, our free time fighting that? I mean, for me personally, the answer would be no. I can't speak for everyone, but I think that that is a huge part of our mission. But I do also think that the height is important here, and it's important because there are disproportionate impacts that come from a building of this height to the community in the construction that happens around and in the lasting effects from shadows and wind tunnels and such. And it's, a problem in our view when something of that scale can be built without going through a ULURP process and without having our elected officials have a say in that. So, I would say that those are both very important parts of the problem for us, and it's not necessarily one over the other, but I don't think that we would be here if we were just talking about bringing that scale of addition of affordable housing to the neighborhood.
I want to add one more.
Can I just build on that? So I think that, yes, there's this immediate challenge of the tower at IPN. I think it would be good for all of us to take a step back and really, think about our wish list, almost like from a kind of neighborhood programming perspective about, the money we need for parks, the traffic considerations, the garbage, the affordable housing, and really come up with like a 360-degree, a comprehensive plan of our wish list. And some of it may have to do with the building envelope, and some of it may have to do with trying to get concessions from developers and from the city for the things that we need to, try to have a chance of keeping our community livable. It's a really, really challenging community because it's an international destination. And, we're surrounded by water, and there's also the, resilience issues. And we have some aging buildings. BMCC is an aging building that is right along the line of where flood protection should happen. So all I'm saying is I think it would be good to engage in a kind of open process, not just like a single or dual issue process here if we're going to do this.
So I think let's respond a little bit to that, Laura. The name of our group is Community First Development Coalition, is chosen for that very reason, so that the community does have a say. And we absolutely agree with you that we need to look at all of the things that the community and the neighborhood wants and needs. And hopefully our work will ensure that the community has a say in development, which currently in the Vornado Tower, it essentially does not. And so that's another reason why we are here for this development and for future developments, to work hard to ensure that the community does have a say. And yes, together with the community board, we can develop this kind of understanding of what the community wants and needs. The other thing I want to say about affordable housing and super talls, having been involved with the World Trade Center issue for 3 or 4 years myself personally, I know that super talls do not lend themselves to affordable housing. The cost of a super tall, the cost per unit as the building gets taller over a certain level is not linear. It is, and so it becomes increasingly difficult to include any, and certainly any substantial amount of affordable housing as you get into very tall buildings. This is what we faced in 5 World Trade Center. We were able to get an agreement of a third, but it was a multi-year battle to do that, and very big part of the reason had to do with the height of that building.
Okay, well, I can understand that. I mean, also to Rose's point, though, I mean, I would love to see a comparison of shadow studies of the tall slivers versus the bulkier squatter buildings, because for those of us who live in like a historic building, once something is over a certain height, it's going to cast a shadow, whether it's like 20 stories or 80 stories. So I guess I'm just urging like a really kind of open net investigation of each issue. And and saying I recommend, I'm all for what you're trying to do. Philosophically, I think that for me, the big thing is that the community has more of a say in what gets built in our neighborhood. And I think we just need a lot more information and parameters.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Allison and John, will give the last word.
I appreciate the effort, the presentation. I've been following it thanks to our colleague here, Richard. I would just say that, timing is a big part. First of all, to Laura and Rose's point, I entirely agree that it seems to me like it's a two-pronged initiative. On the one hand, it's a 197A, for lack of a better tool, to look at this very holistically, globally, and really take in the whole, that Tammy's talking about, the entire community board, the entire community, what its needs are. But then you have this subset, which is the specific project. I mean, you have to take great care that this doesn't get interpreted as a NIMBY project. It still smacks of it. You have to be careful in the presentation, that it's not just about the houses that you're in, and the shadows that are falling on your buildings, because immediately it becomes a microcosm of something that developers generally aren't that sensitive to hearing about. So the big picture, I think, has to happen, and maybe it happens at the community board level in our community, and we have somebody who takes on this role. I know Tammy and I and staff are looking for this person, a George Janes type. And then there's what you're doing, and I think you have a huge advantage maybe here in that you're coming upon the local elections. And this is critical in your timing, because right now you're in a position, the only real thing that's going to work here is getting the right mayor who appoints the right landmarks commissioner and your right city planning commissioner to position themselves to be somewhat supportive of this initiative. And the thought of rezoning this area. And so you really want to get out front and center on this and get your questions in there, really consider this in endorsement meetings, and kind of find an ally here, because that's something you didn't have last year, And I would just underline that as an important thing to consider right now.
We're assuming to develop the political strategy as well, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Before John goes, because I know John's the last, the one thing everybody has to remember is every single development site has the opportunity to off-site affordable housing. So we have had sites through Lower Manhattan that we thought were gonna be affordable, or if you look all the way up the island, we'll take Google. Right, that had a big ULURP, everybody was happy, the community walked away going, we're gonna have affordable housing, and they're 2 office buildings. Hudson Yards is struggling from the same thing. So it's not about the deal that's in front of you, it's about the qualifications of the deal, it's about all the other things. Years of World Trade Center was a little bit different. It had to do with their land swap and what they were looking for revenues. They have a different city height rule because it's World Trade Center. There were a lot of other things. Is 30 enough? It was a start. It was better. It was almost a significant portion better than where we started. But if I could start every negotiation at 150, maybe we get to 79. John.
Yeah, so I like to end it that the committee, you did a great job. I was there from the beginning. I saw this coming. I went to a number of people. I met with everybody here before the committee was started. And they did a lot of work. And as far as including the community, they had 2 big meetings where they rented BMCC and said, listen, we want to work on this. And we got people to come forward. And so, to talk about the really intricate stuff, we're not there yet. To say, well, listen, guys, you can't have this in the lower thing because it's going to have a shadow effect on us. We're not there yet. But what they did is amazing. They got this committee together. It's a not-for-profit. They're trying to get a 510C. They included the whole community. And they call meetings. And they have a space where people can come. So all I can say is they did a great job. And I appreciate everybody's, talk about affordable housing. I have fought for affordable housing all of my life. I'm an Independence Plaza. I'm a past president of the Tenants Association. I'm president of the Senior Center. Yes, we fought for affordable housing and we'll continue. But what we're doing now is trying to get together because there's an as of right where they can build this without any affordable housing. And there's 2 components, as they said. There's the near future and there's the 10 years out. 20 years out. Now, I'm not going to be alive 10 to 20 years. I'll tell you that right now. But listen, we're working on it. We need your support. It's nice to say, do this, do that, but just give us the support. Get the community board to start what Tammy has said. get the whole community board thinking about zoning. Because that's where we're at. Not that we're gonna solve the problem. My opinion is there's something gonna be built on that site. And we're gonna fight like hell. We're gonna try to get a new mayor in there that will help us, a new city planning person to help us. But they did a great job, and I just like to thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, that's a good way to end it. Thank you guys for coming. Thanks for presenting. Yeah, just beginning.
Yeah.
See you again very soon.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks for taking our invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
Okay, next on our agenda, is, I presume this is a section 195 application
Yes.
from the New York City Independent Budget Office. This is a proposed move from 110 William Street, which is largely being vacated for the move for ACS into that building. It looks like they were looking to move to One Battery Place. Yeah, that's it.
Yep.
So we have from,
Eric,
Can you put that?
where's that, Eric?
Different,
Eric?
Yeah, one is an introduction.
That's
just
Richard.
as a-
Oh, those were two.
Yeah.
We're gonna start with the one that says an introduction to IBO, and then we're gonna go into the technical one.
Yeah, I think it's.
got it.
And we have printed copies on the table. I think most people got them, but if you didn't yet.
So just a,
You can have the other one.
sorry, I'm having a presentation there, but just for our committee members, we've lost some.
We're gonna lose some more.
They were not as interesting.
I'm not Nostradamus, but we'll do some more, so, you know, big fella.
Wow. Speed up, you're saying,
All
right?
right, I'm not saying that, it's not,
I got you.
it's not your fault, it's my
I'm
fault.
kidding, man. I don't know that we've received the actual section 195.
I don't think you have. I think it's about to go to city planning and then you'll get it.
And
But I
that'll
would-
help, that'll really answer my question.
I'll
Where you
explain
want
some of the
from.
context,
Thank you.
okay?
So introduce yourself and take it away.
I'm Marla Simpson. My title is Special Assistant to the Director. For those, this is not my first rodeo here at CB1. I presented routinely during the 90s in a different hat. But I'm here, I work on the operations side of our agency, and for us, the most critical operational challenge that we face is that, to be blunt, our current office space sucks, and we need to be out of it yesterday, and we've been trying really since the new director took office in 2023 to do something to make the space that our staff works in habitable. Before I go into the challenges of that, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Heina. She's our director, and one of the things that happened in our leadership transition in 2023 is we did a big all-hands-on-deck strategic plan, and we really are making a concerted effort to expand and embed community outreach and engagement as a critical part of our mission. And Tina is leading that, and she can explain a little bit about who we are, what we do, and then I'll get back to where we do it.
Yeah, and I'll go, quick. I know the previous presentation was needed but long. My name is Tina Gordo. I'm the Chief Outreach and Engagement Officer at the IBO. And I mean, I hope that, I know that we met at, during the Borough Board meeting. Yeah. Yeah.
Just saying.
And, oh, excuse me, for everybody here. Sorry, I just went down the wrong one.
Just a glass of cold water. I just.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Sorry about that.
That's my phone, but that's okay, it's more the power cord. Let's just keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. I'm.
Take over.
Going.
Yeah, so the Independent Budget Office, we're a nonpartisan city agency, and we provide data-driven fiscal and policy insights into how New York City's government and services operate. You can go to the second,
Water left.
you can go to that second slide. And and I just want to point out that we were created in the as part of the comprehensive changes to New York City government that occurred in 1989. And as part of that charter foundation, we were given certain functions, and one of them are chartered mandated reports on the city budget. And so we do that 3 times a year. We do that after the November plan. Thank you.
after prelim, and after, exec. And in that, we're basically doing our own estimates of both the revenue coming in and the expenses we think the city will incur, and those contrast to those estimates given by, OMB, and by city council. So that's what we mean here, where we say that we provide charter mandated reports. Those are 3 mandated reports that we do. But one of our other major functions that I just want to point out also is different. A lot of times we're compared with the Congressional Budget Office, but the Congressional Budget Office serves Congress, and we're here really to serve the public, community, from the community boards to someone with a searing question on the budget on the street. And so we answer questions often from council members because they know who we are, but we're really trying to get out there to get questions from anywhere out there. And something we've been offering to community boards is even working with community boards to craft a question we can answer, because we are limited by the kind of data that we have access to. But, we can review that together.
The data that we have is remarkable compared to what a normal sort of member of the public can get. We do not normally, we have to use FOIL, and the charter gives us access to essentially all data that city agencies keep other than personal identifying information.
And something that's interesting that I've found in my interactions with community boards is that people want community board level data, and that can be hard because that data isn't always collected at the community board level. But where it is, we definitely do provide it. And so if you can go to the next slide, just goes into a little bit more of what we do year round. Like I said, we have reports that answer questions from council members and the public. We also testify at city council. In some cases, they're part of the committee on finance. We're reviewing the mandated reports I talked about earlier that review the budget, but we also do testify on a variety of other subjects. And here you'll see examples where we testified on the policy to expand the school security guard program, and also on the fiscal projections for the New York City legal cannabis market. These are just examples of where if we have the information, we'll go and testify. And we also do presentations and provide general resources, and we offer ourselves as presentations to community boards on how the budget works. We have some presentation called Budget 101, which is where I met Tammy.
Which is what we want you to kind of do, to talk about revenues that come to the city, particularly in general as they relate to real estate.
You're basically.
Notes, note taking.
All right, so definitely.
We all have you though.
And, we can also tailor presentations to the various committees, that exist in a community board. So we're happy to do that, and I'd love to be in conversation. Sinray is someone that we hired whose sole focus, well, not sole, but one of her major focuses is to work with community boards. And so I'll make sure that she gets in touch with you guys later. And I just want to point out that something else that's exciting to me is that we're also going to be creating classes for high school students on how the budget works. So if you have a high school with a civics class, please get in touch.
Bertram High School.
Okay.
It's literally down the.
Yeah, you can see it out the window.
My sister-in-law used to work there. I didn't know that.
Okay.
Next slide, please. And this is just, I'm not gonna go into the calendar, but I will say this is what we do in our Budget 101 report. And we are currently actually a little bit past, I would say, where the yellow star is on this slide. We're after January, so we're awaiting the prelim budget. And the next report that we'll have, that mandated report I was talking about, is on the prelim budget. And I'm happy to come to send analyst or come here myself to present on the prelim budget once we've publish that report, which will be in February, and where we'll again talk about revenues coming in and expenses going out. And a couple of examples, next slide, please, on again, talking about that data that we have access to. One of the major products we have that we update regularly is called Education Indicators. Here, this is an example of where we've kept longitudinal records of the enrollment. But in some cases, we have done school district level data. Unfortunately, it's not community board level data, but we do have school district level data on enrollment. One of the charts we have, if you come and visit our website and go to school product, is charter schools at the school district level. And the next two slides are examples of recent reports that we've had. So in the next slide, you'll see that we actually today released a report comparing the Safe Hotels Act and looking at what the previous iteration of that act was and what it looks like now. And our major finding from that was that many low-cost, independent, and limited amenity hotels will not be affected given the bill's original version. So this was just an example. It may not be relevant for this community board, but yeah. And then my last slide is on one of the second to last report that we've had, which was looking at the funding for new arrivals, also known as asylum seekers, at the budget level, and looking at how much the administration budgeted and how much we actually spent. And so in 2024, we saw that 20% less than what was budgeted was spent. And we see that while the number of new arrivals is declining, the administration has actually increased its cost estimates. It hasn't kept its cost forecast, like its cost estimates, in line with what we see and project the arrivals number to be. I'm happy to send those reports if you'd like to.
We have a shelter closing at 99 Washington for migrants in the end of Q1, more or less. We've had another migrant shelter sold. So we are very curious about this. We know that the migrant shelter that was on Washington Street was used as part of a survival of bankruptcy court by the owner of the building as a way to work his way out. So I wondered if the increase in cost estimates have to do with the rack rate of hotel rooms that have been used versus other, costs.
Controller did a deeper dive. I mean, one of the challenges in this area has been that the city routed a lot of the procurements through off-budget agencies, particularly H&H. And so while ultimately the controller was able to get the contracts, it wasn't as seamlessly available as it might have been in a normal setting. And so there is data that emerged, and we looked at some of that in a couple of our earlier reports referenced it about what the per diem costs were. And part of what was pumping up the cost of the budget projection, which again, IBO correctly estimated would end up being, the city's estimates were high, but part of what was pumping it up was this inflated per diem rate, which was above what they were paying in DHS shelters and other, sort of things that had been procured through the normal system, both nonprofit and for-profit providers. But the takeaway of this one is basically just over time, there were these estimates, there were these budget projections, they consistently projected high. We consistently estimated that the actuals would be lower, and oops, they were.
Actually, our next slide, just a thank you slide with our contact information on there. And like I said, I'm happy to come, even if we want more information on any of our more recent reports, we're happy to send an analyst to come and talk about a particular report specifically. So just as some of the resources that we provide now.
We have so many questions. We're never letting you leave.
Let's get to the one thing, William.
Yeah, do this work if we're not able to house our staff. And so I want to get back, and one of the reasons, again, we have very unique charter-based powers, again, based on the work that was done in 1989. And it makes us, from the standpoint of a small agency, it gives us a lot of leverage because we have guaranteed funding. But there are some aspects where the charter does lock us into the rest of the city system, and the leasing process is one of those. So what I'm presenting here is for you to be able to understand what our lease proposal is, and for you to be able to question us about the lease. Ultimately, this has to be a DCAS lease because the charter requires it. You can see I've actually used DCAS's slides as part of what I'm going to present to you, and it will be DCAS that is the applicant when the document is filed. And I do understand that particularly in the real estate arena, nowadays, there are many questions raised about what's going on at DCAS. We have those questions too. However, what, again, I'd like to make clear to the board is that the space we are asking for approval in the 195 process is space that this agency identified on our own without
DCAS. We brought it to DCAS. We did not rely on them or any of their process to identify it. Which is why we are here presenting it. Ultimately, for it to be done as a city lease, it has to be under the charter, will have to be a DCAS lease, and they are moving at least deliberately, I won't say quickly, but we lost, you guys previously approved or at least reviewed, I don't remember whether you did a resolution on 80 Pine. 80 Pine had been identified as a office space for our agency. I think it was first identified late in 2022, right before our new director took office. And in almost 2 years, DCAS barely managed to move to the stage of having an attorney negotiate the lease. And so when that building was sold, it was sold with the existing leases in place, but we didn't have one. So we were forced to start over. And so that's why we are taking a slightly different path this time and trying to, as much as we can, move the process.
I appreciate you staying downtown, by the way.
Yeah.
You really do.
Um,
One of the titles of this committee is economic development.
Yeah, and look, and
And
so let me talk a little bit about, again, this is, also a Rudin property, as was 80 Pine. Just so you guys know, I mean, one of the reasons why we reached out to that development, team, there are people there, including, the head of the real estate, who himself has a history in city government and also, worked for many years in economic development for Chuck Schumer. So he's somebody who we thought, we could have an honest conversation with. We went and we looked at the space, in, Battery Park Plaza. The space that we're in 110 William, might have been adequate in size when we first moved in, whenever that was, 25, 30 years ago. But our staff was half the size as it is today. We don't have room to even give everybody their own desk. We're using an aggressive remote strategy where, as a non-mayoral agency, we are not bound by city policies, and so we have more flexibility about when our staff has to come and go. But there is clearly a benefit, particularly for the collaborative kind of work that we do, and also certainly for our community engagement efforts. There's benefit for us to be in person and to be able to work together as a team, and we need space that can accommodate. And we are twice the size as we were when we first moved into 110. So the space that we found in Battery Park Plaza is considerably larger, more than double our current space, and it will, through a 20-year lease, we expect it will accommodate our projected rate of growth. One of the interesting things aside on the budget is nobody can actually predict the future, of course, but our budget is defined to be a percentage of OMBs. So we've got a pretty high level of confidence that it will grow.
Since they control the budget.
I'm just saying, if they go up, we go up. So, we believe, we did a modest projection on our growth, and we wanted to make sure that we'd have room to be able to continue to have staff, housed well, over the course of 20 years. But it was also important to us to put in, a conference facility that was large enough to allow us to have and host, modest-sized community meetings. And that is something we don't have now. We go around sort of begging for space when we just did, for example, a 35th anniversary at New York Law School, and that was a very large event. But even a small event for 20 or 30 people, we can't really host where we are now. So we're hoping to do those kind of sessions in our new space. And that's about it. I mean, the rest of this won't look any different. With the original application, it just gives you the difference in square footage. The zoning, obviously, is similar. We have no parking permits. We have no cars. We don't expect to be a burden on the community in that way. And we expect to be happy consumers of the park.
Or others, can I ask, did the current landlord, were there discussions about giving you more space and expanding out and building something nicer there, given all the work that's going on in that building right now, particularly?
Before our current leadership took office, there had already been a decision by the city to give that building to ACS. That was not on the table for us. We don't have within the city structure much market power, right? We there's nothing and we don't hold an independent relationship with the landlord of 110. That relationship is to DCAS. And they had made a decision to consolidate ACS there, and all of the plans for the construction. And I will say, it's very clear that that's what's driving the operations. I mean, we are currently still operating in the 14th floor. The level of dust is quite considerable. The level of noise is at times unbearable. And the plan that they've announced, they haven't implemented yet, but is that they're going to tell us that we have to go 4 floors up to be able to get to a bathroom. And they only have a couple of elevators working. So it's kind of like camping. We really need, really need to move.
We can sympathize, they have been, let's just say, not a great neighbor. Matt lived across the street from that building, and I know everything not everything you're going through, but I see it day to day. Let me just ask one more question. So again, I'm not second guessing the choice of this site. It's a great building, actually, used to work in that building, but the convenience factor for the people who do work for your agency, is it more or less convenient, or kind of neutral?
I mean, pretty much everything in Lower Manhattan is accessible to multiple train lines. I mean, this way, you know, you've got the 4, it's not far from the 2-3, it's not far from the R, you know, all the, you know, people can get to that line directly or by transfer quite easily.
Never as convenient as Portland.
I mean, look, I commute from Brooklyn by ferry, and it will be a slightly longer walk for me, but, I'm fine.
Nicole and then Tammy?
Marla, can you share with us what you're paying now and what you're going to pay?
I know those numbers only by aggregate. I can get you a square footage number, but we are in the 400,000 annual bracket now. A little higher, maybe. There's some offsets.
So if we,
This will eventually get to the 8-to-1 $1 million range. We have mapped that out against our budget, and we will have no problem accommodating that. And it leads, as you might be aware, in the market nowadays, there is a significant amount of free rent in the initial 3 years of the
so you're
project.
getting to your,
Yes, yes. Again, these are, I will, they're, at the point when we brought DCAS in, obviously, they were involved in the finalization of the term sheet, but the original terms were negotiated by us.
I just want to say hello to you. I remember you from
I thought you might, I remember you.
1990. Ward 4.
Yeah, I was a land use person
Yes,
back
I
then.
learned a lot from you.
Some of it I've unlearned, but you know, I
Yeah.
left city government, after Ruth, left the borough president's office. I went back in, under Mayor Bloomberg, and then I left again, and I've come back to IBO, so I'm a recidivist.
Okay, and for IBO questions, could we get a breakdown about how much Parks gets down here?
I don't, is the data on that geographic? That's my question.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I can ask,
And
for sure.
Track, you
Yeah.
know, year to year. kind of thing?
You can certainly monitor capital investment because that's location driven. But I don't know whether the operational.
Because we have an urban fellow who's studying the parks on the east side right now. And perhaps he could stay in contact with your office.
I can put him in touch with, with Jordan, who's our, parks analyst, and ask. I just always want to temper expectations because there's so many parts of the budget that can't be broken down by
Sure.
geographic location, but certainly we can look,
All right, if
yeah.
you could just send that over to Henry, that'd be great.
Mhm. Okay.
So my, Rosa, you next or me?
You're next. but-
Tammy, then
My one question is about, how does your office deal with work from home? And do you have a work from home policy? And how's that being accounted for with the new space? Because you're increasing your footprint. But objectively, anyway,
Right.
IBO can tell us work from home usually means less foot traffic versus more. So can you?
It's hard to say whether that's true or not because we've altered our mission significantly or enhanced our mission significantly in the same time frame as we've been moving back to work from the office. So let me put it this way. Obviously, like every other city agency, there was a time when IBO was 100% remote. We have then, most recently been on a 3-2, schedule. And we're considering, at least in the short term, allowing some additional flexibility to staff because it's literally hard for them to work with the construction that's going on. It's on our floor now. For a while, it was just in the building, but it's now on our floor. So we may need to do that. However, I will say, and we have many activities, collaborative work that we do in teams. Everyone in our, on our staff, I think, is believer in the value of our being together when we can do that. I mean, there are times, if you're an analyst and your main task of the day is to write, you know, a 5-page paper defining your findings, it may well be better for you to do that at home, you know, in your PJs. But many of the activities that we do are hands-on collaborative, you know, what if sessions with each other, and those are better in person. So our goal over time is to be in the office. I don't know that the world is ever going to go back to 5 days in the office always, but we expect to have people in the office 5 days a week going forward, and we expect to activate the space with other, you know, by bringing in outsiders. And I mean, we have what we call a brown bag series where we invite outside speakers to speak to our staff. Many of those sessions would be of interest to community board chairs or advocates who work on the same issues. We don't have the space to invite anybody to attend our brown bags anymore, but they're free. And if we add space, that is something we could do.
I'm happy to loan you our office until you're set up. Seriously.
If I want to be on the list.
We're happy to loan you our conference room.
We will figure out, ways to do that. I mean, I think that.
So just to bring this around,
Thank you.
So since we don't, I know it was down for a resolution on our agenda, but I don't think we're at the point of a resolution yet. So once we get the 195 application materials from, well, I guess they'll come from.
They come from DCAS, and I believe they'll come this week.
Okay. And then,
30 days from there?
yeah, I'm just trying to draw one.
They're actually,
City planning refers it out, I think.
yeah, well, I don't, this is one where it's like,
No, it doesn't. The city planning doesn't.
yeah, it's
That's right.
kind of optional.
Once we give a notice of it by DCAS, we've got,
I have his
30
email
days to
from
give
Board.
our
I think he said they're
communication.
aiming for an early February city planning hearing. He put it in his email to us today.
I mean, I would vote for resolution board if we're, like, I mean, there.
I
doesn't
think
feel
it's
like there's
important to
anything.
move last time, and then we had a concern about the way DCAS handled. And so,
Yeah.
we could go.
But that was not about us. That was
No,
not.
no, no.
That was about them, not about you, about the Realtor and the administration, but you've made that perfectly clear to us tonight that it's none of that. So
Yeah.
if the committee, and I leave it to the committee and the chair feels so, and we could do
Do we want to?
I would just, I mean,
A minute?
I'm not gonna ask you guys to come back, but I would really wait until we have the application materials. I think we need to see what DCAS gives us in terms of the application materials.
Mhm.
I would be surprised how they could do the city planning hearing early Feb if they haven't, I mean, we haven't even exhausted 30 days from having gotten.
I'm not, is there a formal 30? I don't know what I mean, yeah.
I believe it's 30 days, but nevertheless, and that's not to hold you guys up at all. I
Right.
just want to follow the process.
They should follow the process.
And they're not, that's with us either, as you guys seem to know.
Good.
So, I think
We would,
and we'll figure out how to deal with it.
and again, we don't want to put you guys in a bad position. We're fine if you choose to take no position, which I think is one of your options in this situation. It's not like I understand that you have systemic concerns about the process, and we don't, we understand that. If you choose that it's better for you to be silent than to be supportive, we would understand that, whatever works best for you.
As I'm hearing the sense of the committee, and I would suspect the sense of the board is not that we would be supportive, it's that we need to see the application materials and see exactly how recast characterizes certain things.
Yeah,
We've had a problem with that in the past.
Yeah.
In terms of how they characterize the financial district. That puts you in the middle, I know.
well, yeah, this came from them. This is basic, I made one edit in here to basically tell them that our staff had doubled in size, but
Right.
this is basically their materials. I suspect the application will be consistent with this.
And then, then should be no problem and we can get it through that pretty easily. And I don't think we would need another presentation. What we'll do
Yeah.
is refer back to this presentation. Make sure members have the materials in advance and just vote.
Okay.
Right,
Thank
thank you. Sue.
Thank you.
I had a couple of questions.
Sure.
So piggybacking on what Michael was asking regarding, parks, do you know budget-wise why
Rosa, can I ask you to have those conversations?
offline? Okay.
offline separately?
Yeah.
We got
We want you to have
lots of
space.
loose-
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
For literally 3 minutes, because it's just, the next thing is an announcement. So you don't even have to leave, and then we're gonna, I think, adjourn.
Great.
Our announcement is this. Okay, this image that you're looking at was circulated on behalf of the mayor's office by FX Collaborative. That is 100 Gold Street. Actually, Pace is north of that.
Oh, really?
Yes. That tiny building is Pace.
Is the building on the corner of Franklin where Gold, where?
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. So if we're taking a look, this is the Gary building.
Okay, yeah.
This is 100 Gold, and what this is showing is a full-on base that takes the entire,
You don't have to look.
the entire envelope, and then 3 towers, a short, a medium, a tall, that is in line with the Gary building. In order to do this, this would be rezoned to something from R6 to R18. And this conversation will happen and be presented by EDC at executive. They could not come tonight because they had a full-on meeting and they couldn't present tonight. So the review of this will be done at executive committee. It is huge. We've had some preliminary discussions. We're working to ensure the outreach to the community is done well. So we're reaching to Pace, we're reaching to Southbridge, we're reaching to many different things. I will point out that we will have lots of opportunity at that meeting to pass a resolution. And I want people to come through with, pursuant to the dialogues we've had tonight, thoughts of what you would want in that building, thoughts of where we're short. I mean, I initially asked why they couldn't do a land swap with New York Presbyterian and therefore have the building closer to the taller towers and then give us a world-class brand new, because the building that New York Presbyterian is 40 years old and limited. So, it could have been that. I mean, there's so many opportunities that we're not hearing.
Just has it right?
Yeah, but R18 is a unit.
It is.
So
how
how
do
do
you-
we have to install it?
So understand when they,
It's also a disposition of city property.
so it's a
Yeah.
disposition of city property. The land is free at the moment.
Yeah.
So we, as Alice says, the land and the building belong to the people of New York. We should really get our acts in gear. The meeting with EDC will be to hear what they have to say, to design a survey of community wants and needs. I already expressed to them when they said they were going to go down that road, that it has to be qualified by those who live in the district with addresses and things like that. Because it's lovely that there are lots of groups from external CB1 who tell us what we want. But we know the needs. Our number one need in Lower Manhattan is affordable housing, period, full stop. With the closing of the other hospitals that are closest to us uptown, we have a real medical need. We have many needs in this area. So we need to really start to think collaboratively, no pun intended, but really make our ask. And if we don't think that we're ready to make the ask and the city wants to move too fast, there's no shame in saying, let's wait, let's get a little bit more research, let's get a little bit more opportunity. Let's find a way to build the things that we need to build. So with that, that is my announcement. I hope to see everybody the 23rd of January at exec. We're gonna try and get the room downstairs, because I know Southbridge has a lot to say about this, but so should everybody.
Yeah.
Because think about it, places for the placards to get off the streets. I could think of like 12 things off the top of my head immediately that could be done. This is city-owned property. If they're gonna redevelop, we have so many chances to make something really amazing in Lower Manhattan. And with that, I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm good.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We're adjourned.
Excellent. Well, I did just check.
So, I know.